Did Buckingham Palace or Prince William set a trap for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and were they gullible enough to fall into it? Harry and Meghan Markle's surrogacy scandal has entered the mainstream media domain.
Fresh tension is reportedly building inside Buckingham Palace again, and Meghan Markle is back in the middle of another royal storm. Critics have long claimed Meghan tried to handle the monarchy with polished PR, glossy photos, emotional interviews, and carefully controlled public moments, as if royal tradition could be managed like a celebrity brand instead of a rigid institution. To her harshest detractors, she seemed to believe image could outrun protocol, and that public sympathy could quiet questions the palace was never going to ignore forever. Now the whispers have allegedly grown louder once again. Royal watchers, commentators, and online critics are reviving claims that concerns may have resurfaced around official records, christening procedures, and the standards tied to royal lineage. Whether any of that becomes official is another matter, but the fact that these rumours keep returning has made the whole issue feel explosive all over again. That is why this story refuses to disappear. In royal life, matters tied to lineage are not treated like a lifestyle rollout or a glossy personal narrative. The monarchy leans on precedent, records, church practice, and institutional process, so even the appearance of irregularity can trigger gossip and serious questions. That is also why Meghan's strong push for privacy has remained such a lightning rod. Her supporters say she had every right to protect her family from non-stop intrusion. Her critics argue that the tighter she controlled access, the more she encouraged suspicion.
People think her kids are fake, they think they're AI, they think they're borrowed kids, like all these sorts of things because of Meghan and Harry.
Because in royal matters, secrecy rarely calms people down. It usually makes them look even closer. According to palace-style chatter, things reportedly heated up again after Meghan shared another family image featuring Archie outside the Montecito home. Instead of softening public opinion, that post allegedly reignited old whispers, because every time the Sussexes release child-focused visuals, critics start digging back through timelines, announcements, and church details, as if they are still trying to solve a mystery. That renewed attention has reportedly pushed royal commentators to revisit older statements, medical references, press notices, and baptism details tied to the children. Not necessarily because anyone wants a public scandal, but because the monarchy has always treated lineage as a serious institutional matter. In that world, clarity matters, precedent matters, and anything unusual leaves a mark. One advisor, according to rumour, allegedly noticed that some records and public-facing details appeared vague or did not follow the traditional royal format people expected. That reportedly opened discussion about whether certain steps matched the spirit of older royal standards, especially when key moments took place far outside the usual palace structure. And that is where Meghan's privacy-first style is said by critics to have backfired. The less visibility there was, the more room there was for theory, gossip, and palace whispers. In royal scandal culture, missing details do not stay empty for long. They get filled by speculation.
Buckingham Palace is being pressured to remove Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet from the UK's royal line of succession until the Duchess provides absolute proof that she popped out both babies herself.
Meghan entered this world like it was a Hollywood set, assuming she could rewrite the script, center herself in every scene, and edit out anything that didn't fit her narrative.
Especially when critics already believe Meghan has always tried to bend tradition around her own image. Some of the sharpest palace chatter boils the whole issue down to one blunt question. If everything was handled in a standard and proper way, why did so much of it look unusual to long-time royal watchers? That question alone has kept the speculation alive, because once people think something looks off, every detail starts to feel loaded with meaning. Critics also keep bringing up stories that Meghan maintained very tight control over access during her pregnancy period. Those claims have floated around for years, with gossip circles insisting that staff and insiders were kept at a distance. Whether that was simple privacy or something exaggerated by hostile observers, it became part of the atmosphere surrounding the debate. That is why Archie's paperwork continues to get so much attention. When people revisit this controversy, they often point first to the birth certificate amendment as the moment public confusion truly took off. Archie was born on May 6, 2019, and early reporting indicated Meghan was listed under her legal name, Rachel Meghan Markle, which appeared routine at first. Then came the change that sent critics into overdrive. Roughly a month later, the document was reportedly amended, so her personal name was replaced with the formal styling, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex, and to palace traditionalists, that looked like the kind of retroactive adjustment that creates more questions instead of fewer. In a monarchy known for formal wording and ceremonial precision,
I do believe because there are no delivery certificates, and I heard stories early on around the time Archie was allegedly in utero and being born. I heard stories that royal staffers were not allowed to see or touch her abdomen.
that kind of edit was always going to attract attention. Meghan's side reportedly suggested palace officials were behind the change, while palace-linked reporting pushed a different version, implying Meghan wanted the revision herself. Two competing narratives, one sensitive document, and no clean public explanation, which is exactly the kind of contradiction that keeps royal controversy alive. The absence of the usual hospital easel announcement also remained a talking point. To outsiders, that may seem like harmless royal theatre, but to traditional palace watchers, it forms part of a familiar pattern of public confirmation surrounding senior royal births. So, when Archie's arrival did not unfold in that classic style, critics treated it as another sign that the Sussexes were choosing control over custom. If Archie's case raised confusion, then Lilibet's birth pushed palace speculation into even shakier territory for critics. Born on June 4th, 2021, in California, her arrival was presented through Harry and Meghan's own communication channels rather than the traditional palace-led framework royal watchers were used to seeing. That difference alone was enough for traditionalists to claim the process no longer looked institutional, but personal and tightly managed. To supporters, that is understandable because the couple were living in America and no longer operating as senior working royals. But to critics, that only widened the sense that the Sussexes wanted the status of royalty.
Meghan didn't like the surname Mountbatten Windsor. If you remember, in her first lifestyle series with Meghan with them forever, she says to Carling that her surname isn't Markle but Sussex. And she was desperate to get it. She said, we never had a proper surname. And of course they did.
Without the formal process that usually comes with it. No familiar UK medical framework. No palace-led witness chain, no classic structure, and suddenly the event looked detached from precedent. Then, the image debate made things even louder. Photos released during Meghan's pregnancy were dissected online, with critics comparing angles, posture, timing, clothing, and lighting in exhausting detail. Some said the visuals looked inconsistent from one appearance to the next, while supporters dismissed the whole thing as unfair and invasive. But once those debates started, they took on a life of their own. Some royal commentators also noted that certain names associated with reporting around the birth seemed to fade from view after media speculation intensified. That does not prove anything dramatic on its own, but in an institution built on visible procedure and documented continuity, any gap in the public story quickly becomes fuel for more rumour. Then came the christening issue, which for many palace traditionalists was where the real discomfort allegedly deepened. Royal christenings are not seen merely as sentimental family milestones. They carry ceremonial weight, archival value, and religious significance within a monarchy that places enormous importance on continuity and formal record-keeping. That is why the private Montecito christening drew so much attention. The service, reportedly led by Bishop John Taylor of the Episcopal Church, may have been meaningful and heartfelt for Harry and Meghan, but it did not fit neatly into the Church of England framework traditionally associated with royal children. That difference became a major point of criticism very quickly. Critics argued that palace archivists and traditionalists would naturally be uneasy if the expected Anglican trail was not present in the usual way. No typical Church of England ledger, no standard royal clerical record, and no clear continuation of the old pattern. To them, this was less about religion and more about whether personal preference had once again overridden institutional precedent. That is the larger clash at the centre of Meghan's royal story. She and Harry often appear to prioritise privacy, personal control, and their own way of doing things. The monarchy, by contrast, is built on precedent, structure, and documented compliance with traditions that have lasted for generations. Those two mindsets were always heading toward conflict, and once they collided, it was always going to get messy. That is why even small details keep exploding around Meghan now. A family image becomes a debate over presentation. A certificate amendment becomes a fight over trust. A private christening becomes a question of recognition and protocol. Every grey area gets pulled back into the same larger argument by critics who believe the Sussexes have been trying to rewrite royal norms from the start. And that is where the story takes another uneasy turn. Because once attention reportedly moved beyond the paperwork and church details, palace watchers and online analysts allegedly began looking again at Sussex holiday cards and publicity portraits with fresh eyes. What they believed they noticed in those images did not calm the wider doubts at all, and instead reopened the same whispers public analysts had been circling for years. The more those images circulated, the more the questions got louder. And that is where the whole thing started looking even messier for Meghan and Harry. Critics claimed the photos featuring Archie and Lilibet did not show the smooth visual continuity people would normally expect from children who had supposedly been photographed across different periods in a clear and natural way. In one holiday image, online commentators argued that Archie appeared older than his reported age, with facial proportions and features that did not seem to match earlier appearances people had already studied to death. In another image, critics said Lilibet's head position, the lighting around her face, and the angle of the shadows looked just a little too off compared with Meghan and Harry. Enough to get the internet spinning again. That is where photo analysts, online sleuths, and royal watch channels piled in hard. Some claimed there were odd reflection patterns, slight texture shifts, and subtle focal inconsistencies across the same frame. Details they said can appear when an image has been heavily edited, composited, or assembled from different elements rather than captured in one clean moment. Even ordinary viewers started pointing to how stiff Meghan's hold looked in some shots, saying the poses felt more arranged than natural, like the children did not fully blend into the flow of the scene. Now, none of that automatically proves wrongdoing, and that part matters. A strange-looking image can come from lighting, compression, retouching, lens distortion, bad timing, or nothing more than internet over-analysis. But inside a royal context, even small visual oddities can create bigger discomfort than they would for any normal celebrity family. Because royal photographs are not just cute keepsakes for a scrapbook. They often function as part of a wider public record tied to identity, continuity, and historical presentation. That is why the palace angle supposedly became more intense. If Buckingham Palace or royal archivists ever felt they could not comfortably rely on the visual record without questions being raised, then the pressure would naturally shift to everything else: birth documentation, formal notices, church records, and institutional verification. In other words, if the pictures start debate, the paperwork has to be rock solid. Because the monarchy cannot afford uncertainty around something as sensitive as succession and lineage. This is what critics say the real palace anxiety is about. It is not supposed to be about Meghan's personality, her parenting, or her lifestyle branding. It is about whether every part of the record tied to royal children is clear, traceable, and historically consistent enough to stand up under scrutiny if anyone ever pushed the matter into a legal or constitutional challenge. The monarchy has weathered scandals before, from affairs to interviews to messy divorces, but ambiguity around lineage is the kind of issue institutions take seriously because it cuts right into the heart of how succession works. That is the real tension in this story. Succession is not built on emotion, media sympathy, celebrity interviews, or public feelings. It rests on documented facts, accepted procedures, and old institutional standards that were around long before podcasts, streaming contracts, and glossy magazine covers. The Crown does not get to shrug and say close enough when titles, rank, and hereditary rights are involved, and that is why the rumours around quiet internal review have sounded so serious to royal watchers. Some commentators say palace reviewers likely saw the bigger risk immediately. If these matters were left hanging for years and then challenged later, the embarrassment would not just hit Meghan and Harry, it would hit the monarchy itself on a global stage. That is why, in this version of events, officials would rather look carefully and quietly now than face a larger public mess down the line. Institutions like Buckingham Palace tend to move slowly, but when they sense a possible loophole, they do not like leaving it sitting there for the world to pick apart. For Meghan, that possibility hits where it hurts most, because it is not just about royal image, it is about the entire value of the Sussex brand. After leaving royal duties, she and Harry built a public and commercial identity around being more than former working royals. They became the modern rebel branch of the House of Windsor, telling their own story while still holding on to the mystique that came from their royal ties and their children's place in that historic bloodline. That royal connection was the real power source behind so much of the attention they received. Streaming platforms, publishers, interviewers, and event organisers were not paying top dollar because Meghan and Harry were simply famous. Hollywood is packed with famous people. What made them stand out was the royal element, the idea that they were raising children viewed by the public as part of an active constitutional dynasty, with global fascination attached to every detail. That is why even the suggestion of unresolved gaps, irregularities, or incomplete verification creates business risk, at least in the eyes of critics and industry watchers. If the palace were ever to question aspects of lineage procedure, title recognition, or hereditary clarity, then every executive who invested in the Sussex narrative would suddenly be dealing with instability. And big corporations hate instability more than almost anything else, especially when their whole sales pitch depends on prestige, exclusivity, and perceived historical legitimacy. If that mystique weakens, the brand weakens with it. Suddenly, the Sussexes stop looking like the glamorous royal outsiders rewriting history and start looking, in the harshest version of the narrative, like a celebrity couple trying to hold on to borrowed shine. That is a brutal downgrade in the world of high-end entertainment deals, because prestige is fragile. Once enough doubt creeps in, the room changes, the leverage drops, and the 8-figure offers do not vanish with a dramatic announcement. They just quietly stop showing up. That is why critics say Meghan cannot simply talk her way out of this with interviews, polished statements, or emotional appeals. Lineage questions, if institutions ever treat them seriously, are not decided by charm, branding, or public tears. They are handled by old systems, legal standards, and quiet internal processes that do not care how strong someone's PR machine looks on camera. That is the kind of cold reality that makes palace institutions dangerous opponents, because they do not need to shout to have power. And inside palace walls, silence can be the sharpest weapon of all. The less Meghan and Harry allegedly know about any internal review, the harder it is for them to counter it in public, spin it emotionally, or get ahead of the narrative before facts or conclusions are settled. Royal institutions understand that once they speak too early, they lose control. So if any verification process is happening at all, Critics believe it would be done in near silence, away from cameras, away from podcasts, and far away from the kind of media battlefield Meghan usually knows how to play. That is why Buckingham Palace, in this telling, is not chasing revenge, gossip, or online drama. The institution is doing what it has always done when anything touches succession, protecting constitutional clarity and guarding the line of continuity with extreme caution. Lineage is not trendy, emotional, or negotiable in that world. It has to be documented, historically consistent, and capable of standing up under pressure, even when that process becomes deeply uncomfortable for the people involved. Meghan may be able to shape magazine covers, polished interviews, and streaming edits, but critics say there is one thing she cannot fully control, and that is institutional judgment. Once a palace process begins, the spotlight shifts away from image management and back to the paperwork, the procedures, and the old rules that existed long before modern celebrity culture. That is the part of the story that makes this feel bigger than gossip, because if the monarchy decides clarity matters more than silence, the fallout could reach into titles, heritage, public standing, and the entire commercial dream built around royal mystique. And that is why this whole storm keeps getting darker for Meghan, because no matter how carefully perception is crafted, constitutional legitimacy is the one storyline that cannot be produced, staged, or polished into place if the institution itself is not satisfied with the record. If you want more on this royal drama, watch my previous video where Tom Bower goes in hard on Meghan after fresh claims stirred even more controversy. Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, and subscribe to the channel for more royal updates, scandals, and palace twists you do not want to miss.